4 MotoGP Grand Prix victories in a row has to put Marco Bezzecchi up here at alien status, right? Or does it? Welcome to Monday Morning MotoGP, and yes, we are talking about the Brazilian Grand Prix that happened this last weekend in Brazil. But before we get into everything that happened, if you could please like, follow, share, subscribe, mash all the buttons so you get all the MotoGP content you can possibly imagine. And make sure to comment because, as always, we respond to the comments. We want to talk MotoGP with you, so please come talk MotoGP with us. So we have a lot to get through. It was a really busy weekend in Brazil. The track status was under review. There was rain, there was flooding, there was, was it going to rain all weekend long? Was it going to be a wet race? Was it going to be a dry race? There were so many kind of questions up in the air about how they were going to pull off this event and make it great. And a lot happened. And so let's get into it. And we're going to start, as always this year, with Moto3. I told you last week to keep an eye on this Indonesian kid, Veda Pratama. I told you he was going to be up there. The commentators were talking about him on the broadcast last week. He was running up at the front. And this week in Brazil, it looked like he had fallen back a little bit. But lucky for him, and sometimes luck is all you need in racing, there was a red flag. They got to do a restart. It was a mad dash, 5-lap, literal sprint to the end. And it put him in a position to basically fight for the podium. Now, he had to earn it. He was coming back from further on the grid. I think he was 8th or 9th at the restart, had to make his way forward, was very, very aggressive doing so. But by doing so, makes himself the only Indonesian and first ever Indonesian motorcycle rider to ever be on a World Grand Prix podium. So yes, Moto3 matters. Now, if you didn't watch the Moto3 race, it was kind of insane. We saw high sides galore. Obviously, there's a red flag. I think it was a Scott Ogden crash that they couldn't clear the bike out fast enough on a very, very short lap. The riders were coming around. They didn't want to put the marshals in danger, so they went ahead and red flagged the race and made them kind of do a 5-lap restart. No harm, no foul for the leader. But further back, we saw Pratama be able to take advantage of that and get himself on the podium. So congrats to him. And if he keeps this up, this kid is going to be a big-time Moto3, Moto2, maybe even an Indonesian MotoGP star. But the one thing I wanted to say about Moto3 is for everyone out there who says, well, these low CC bikes, I'm just going to outgrow them. I need a big bike to go fast on a motorcycle. And you don't think that you can side yourself to oblivion on a Moto3 machine? Yes, these are race bikes, but they produce about 60 horsepower. You can buy an R7 that produces that much horsepower and take it out on the street right now. And half of you all out there are going to be like, oh, I'll grow that in a month. I should start on a R9. I should start on an R1. I should get my BMW S1000. If you don't think a 60 horsepower motorcycle can spit you up into the air and high side you to this planet and then to the next one, you weren't paying attention this weekend. Because these motorcycles, they were catching some air. We saw some gnarly crashes, and it doesn't take that much. Just a little bit of loss of traction, and then that grip just pops you up over the top. And these motorcycles, 60 horsepower, still power. It's still going to the ground. And when things go wrong, and your kind of skills are outweighed by the conditions and all the sort of things that go into what actually happens when you high-side a motorcycle, these little machines can pack a hell of a punch. So most of you out there saying you're going to outgrow your R7 within the first year, put your pants back on, sit down. It's going to take a little more than that. So Moto2, I don't have a lot to say about the race. I love that we had battles for first and second. We had battles for third and fourth. I like the fact that we saw some different names. It feels like the new cast of characters in Moto2 is going to be super interesting. We didn't hear from Alex Escrig much before this round. We haven't heard much from Danny Munoz this year. We have heard from Danny Helgado. He's going to be there all year long, I think. But what I'm really grateful for is that this isn't just going to be a Manu Gonzalez runs away from everyone else now that Diogo Moreira is gone. Like, that could have very well been the narrative coming into the season. And some people kind of thought that, well, he had the championship lead last season. He kind of blew it, kind of, screwed it up for himself. Diogo won. Diogo was the better rider, whatever your opinion is on their battle last year. But now with Diogo gone, it's just wide open for Manu Gonzalez to come in and dominate. Unfortunately for Manu, and fortunately for us, that's not really how motorcycle racing works, because there's always going to be someone younger, hungrier, and sometimes faster coming up through the ranks. And it looks like there's a bunch of new hungry riders. It's not just going to be Manu Gonzalez and David Alonso running roughshod over the entire class. Danny Holgado has something to say about it. Danny Munoz has something to say about it. Even Alex Escrige this week has something to say about it. And then we saw Ethan Guevara. We saw these guys. There's going to be a whole bunch of people mixing it up in Moto 2. I don't think it's going to be a cut and dry championship. I think it's going to be very, very wide open. And I really hope it is, because Moto 2 has become almost the highlight of the weekend a lot of times. The racing today wasn't, or yesterday I would say, in Brazil, wasn't box office, every corner lap overtakes, but it did have its share of drama. There was guys kind of coming forward, coming back, overtaking, passes for the lead, passes for the podium, and we did see Escrige run a really, really good race and then heartbreakingly lose the podium there at the very end. Feel bad for him, but the fact that he was up there really just putting his name in the hat, I love to see that. So then we move on to MotoGP, and earlier, before this race even got underway, Pedro Acosta said something that a lot of people found curious. He said, "We have no business leading the championship. We don't actually belong here." And this weekend, the results of the weekend is kind of proving his point. He was saying what we are all going to come to realize is it might not be really a championship contending team and bike and maybe even rider at this point. That combination isn't really there to stay at the top. And it was kind of demonstrated by Pedro's bad weekend. Now, if you are fighting for a MotoGP title, you can't have very many bad weekends. And I know I hear you screaming already. Pecco had all these DNFs and Mark DNFs all the time and still wins the championship. And yada, yes, it happens. But if you're like Pedro and you're on a KTM, that's, let's face it, is not as strong as the Ducati, is not as strong as the Aprilia. You can't have weekends outside the top 6 and still expect to compete for a world title. You just can't do it. He has to win it, kind of like Joan Mir won his championship on the Suzuki. Joan couldn't afford DNFs. He had to be consistent. He had to be on podiums every single week. He only had to win one race to win the title, but he did have to be in the race every single weekend. And this weekend, the P7 for Pedro Acosta and the P9 in the sprint kind of means that he's not really a championship contender, which, to be fair to Pedro, is kind of what he told us at the beginning of the weekend. Everyone who had like a lot of KTM hope going into this weekend, I think we were brought back down to earth a little bit. I'm not saying Pedro can't get on podiums. I'm not saying he can't even win his first race this season. There's going to be places that KTM is strong. But if your bad weekend for KTM is outside of that top 6, beating the likes of Aprilia and Ducati, especially with names like Marc Marquez and Bez riding out of his brain and Jorge Martin coming into the fold, you're not going to win a title against these guys by finishing outside of the top 6. Unfortunately for Pedro, he has to be perfect. He has to be putting that bike near the podium every single week to even have a shot at a Riders' Championship. And even at that, it's a very outside shot. And I think it was kind of cool for Pedro to kind of go, hey, this is where we're at. I'm not trying to pose. I'm not trying to say, yes, I'm a title threat. No one's celebrating, the victory after week 1. I mean, I hope no one's celebrating a victory after week 1. But I think Pedro's kind of a realist, basically tempering everyone's expectations, saying Brazil was going to be a lot harder. Now, speaking of harder, we had a little bit of weird drama at the beginning of the MotoGP race where out of nowhere they cut the race from 32 laps down to 23. And the reason came back as track degradation. Now, it was very, very hot. The pavement was very, very hot. And so a lot of people decide, well, maybe it was rider safety. They didn't want them going that long in the heat. Maybe it was tires. The track was too hot for the tires. Just going to melt the crap out of them, which didn't seem to be the case because all the riders wanted to switch to a softer tire when they realized that the race was going to be shorter. So track degradation is what they actually ended up giving us for the excuse, call it what you want, the reason for the shortened track. And I'm not going to go into speculation. I haven't really read up on what the track degradation means. What I want to talk about is that this is what growing pains look like. When you're trying to do what MotoGP is trying to do and grow the sport, they're going to have growing pains. We're going to go to places or try to go to places that aren't quite ready for MotoGP. And we're going to see changes to the sport that many of the fans won't like, some of the fans will like, and MotoGP is always going to put the best face forward. Now, we have two sides to this argument. On one side, you have MotoGP saying everything's going to be okay. We can go to Brazil and we can pull off a flawless race and there's no dramas behind the scenes. Just don't look behind the curtain. They did the same thing in India. They've done the same thing when they were trying to do the race a few years ago that kept getting canceled in the Middle East. Like there was a lot of things going on that the country's not always ready for a race. And you want it to happen. We want to go to all these parts of the world. We want to be putting on a show for all the fans across the world. But when you go to brand new places you've never been or haven't been in almost 30 years, haven't been to this track in, I think, 37 years, when you're doing that, you're taking the risks that things might not be up to the highest standards. Yes, there's a standard, there's track rules, there's gravel, there's runoff, there's all the kind of technical bits that they can kind of control. They can measure and they can take stock of those kind of things. But it's the things like the water seeping up through the track when they got too much rain, the flooding, the things they can't really project and see going forward. That stuff is going to happen. And so on one side of the argument, you have MotoGP, you have Dorna, Liberty Media, whoever you want to call them now, saying everything's fine, don't worry about it, it's perfect, it's never anything but perfect, it's always great. On the other end of that, you have fans who literally want to cancel the race if there's a stiff breeze. Oh, there's water on the track? Oh, they got to cancel the race, it's unsafe. Oh, there's wind on the track? Oh, you can't go to Phillip Island, it's unsafe. Oh, they have bad infrastructure, bad fan experiences? Oh, we can't go there, that's not possible. Oh, what a disaster. Everything's a disaster. Like the Chicken Little fans. And if you're not a Chicken Little fan, don't come and be mad at me about calling out the Chicken Little fans, because you've seen them on the internet too. Every time there's a little bit of adversity, oh, it's too hot, they should just cancel this race. Oh, it's too cold, they should just cancel this race. Oh, the tires, oh, the oil, oh, the gas, oh, this, oh, that. Whatever it may be, in this case in Brazil, it was the water coming up through the track. We did have that problem on Saturday that did push that Moto2 qualifying into Sunday, which was a little bit weird. There was problems in Brazil, and there was problems with the track. And I think we can acknowledge there were problems with the track, and we can acknowledge that growing pains are going to happen when you go to new places and unexpected things happen. So we think we can acknowledge that, but still try to make it safe to race. And the people on the ground, guess what? They do know better than you. Even if they're not telling us every detail and they're all putting on a smile and saying it's perfect, the riders have representation that says, no, we are not racing here. The team owners have representation that says, no, we are not racing here. But ultimately, everyone wants to race. Racers don't show up to a weekend to not race. Everyone wants the product to be put in front of the world. And so for those of you who are always trying to cancel every race we see unless the conditions are perfect, do you just not want to watch? Do you just only want to watch perfect weather GPs? That would be about 10 races a year, because we get 10 to 12 wild cards, whether it's heat in Thailand, now in Brazil, whether it's rain, whether it's wind at Phillip Island. We get these crazy conditions all the time. So I have a question. Are the folks who are always complaining about, oh my gosh, the wind at Phillip Island is so unsafe, are you all the same people who are also railing against the getting rid of Phillip Island on the schedule? I'm just curious of where you lie in the criticisms of what MotoGP is doing, or do you just hate every decision they make and hate type on your computer and comment on podcasts and things like that? Just an honest question. But I do think MotoGP from their side has to be a little more honest with our skepticism when they say things like there's going to be an Adelaide street circuit and it's going to be perfectly safe and it's going to be ready to race. I think they have to understand our criticism of, is this really the direction you want to go? If that's true, great. If you can make a street circuit through Adelaide work and it's safe for the riders and it works on all levels, fantastic. They've pulled off the F1 race in Vegas, and I saw the city beforehand and went, how are they going to do this? And they've pulled it off. Now, some people don't like it. You can talk about it either way, but they have pulled it off. And I think MotoGP will go down to Australia and pull this off. There's a lot riding on this decision to make this street circuit work. But I do think MotoGP has to accept our criticism of going, listen, we're not just going to take your word for it that, oh, well, we've decided to go here, so it's perfect. Like the India round, we're talking about Finland that we've never been to, that was tried to be scheduled many, many times and never made it there. Several places that we've looked to do MotoGP race and all but scheduled them, to only have them pulled back off the schedule for complications, promoter issues, weather disruption, all these sort of things. So I just don't think it's fair to ask the fans to bury our head in the sand and just pretend that you guys never have an issue with these sort of things. These are the growing pains of the sport. So we have a choice. We can go to the same 10 tracks, the same 12 tracks over and over and over again until the cows come home, and we will never have to worry about the unknown. We will also never have to show the sport to anybody but the 12 people who watched it back 75 years ago. That's our choice. We can either grow the sport, get it visible, try new things, experience growing pains, and we can all be honest with each other that sometimes stuff works, sometimes stuff doesn't. And I would have been a little bummed if they would have canceled the Brazilian GP because it was frickin' good. So let's talk a little bit about the weather in Brazil, because I've always said that rain is the great equalizer when it comes to riders. But I think what was really shown this weekend is that also the MotoGP bikes are really put on a more level playing field when you take away that top 10% of performance. When these bikes have to deal with rainy or mixed conditions and you take away that top level performance, what really separates, a bad bike from a good bike from a great bike. Y'all have to understand that's in a window here. It's not this. It's not, 0 to 60. It is literally one bike's in 87, one bike's in 89, and one bike's in 91. They're really, really close. All these machines, even the slow, horrible Yamaha that no one can ride and is terrible and everyone wants to talk crap about, is a really fast motorcycle. It qualified 4th in a Grand Prix. It's a fast motorcycle. It's not as good as the others. But again, in motorcycle racing and in MotoGP, we're talking about millimeters and microseconds. So when we lose that top 10% of performance because of the rain, weird things can happen. And we can see that the rider matters more because the machinery is kind of in a stalemate because they can't push out that extra bit of performance that gives a Ducati or a Aprilia the edge. You have to ride these bikes very, very close to their limit to start seeing those returns on the investment of all the aero and all the ride height devices and all the tech and electronics and everything they're dialing in. That only really gets dialed in that top 10% of performance. Probably even less than that. I'm no engineer. I'm just using this as a simple benchmark to kind of talk about it. But when you take away that, you give the rain on the track, you get the track a little slick or mixed conditions, and now the rider matters a lot more because the bikes are a lot more even. And we saw some crazy things on Friday practice. We saw Toprak right there in the mix with everyone, which does it prove the Toprak is here to dominate MotoGP like all of his super hardcore fans said? No. Does it prove that Toprak belongs in MotoGP because he's a super talented rider? Absolutely. Because when the bikes kind of evened out, look what he did with that machine. And we saw a bunch of names in that top 10 that wouldn't normally be there because maybe they got a little less to lose. Maybe they're just throwing it to the wind and really putting in hard laps. Hey, it's our chance to get into Q2. We're not going to get into Q2 for the rest of the year. Let's do it now. Let's put our name at the top of the sheets. But also it kind of evens the playing field with the machinery. So the Ducati isn't as good. The Aprilia isn't as good. It brings them all a little closer together. So what was here, what was a window of here, is now a window of there. See what I'm saying? Which is why I think a lot of Toprak fans going out of Friday are like, holy smokes, our boy is in Q2. Second week out. Get ready for domination. Now, unfortunately, we had to come back a little bit to earth on Saturday and Sunday with his race results. But he's kind of right there with the other Yamahas where he should be. He's doing a good job. He's riding. He's learning. And you just can't deny the guy is so freaking talented because you don't get into Q2, rain or shine, in MotoGP unless you are super talented. Now, the other thing I always say as well is the other thing that's the great equalizer are these flyaway races. Are tracks that no one has ever really been to or they don't get to go to that much. Because we see what happens when we go to Italy and the Italian riders really, they know the tracks like the back of their hand. They know every single trick. They know what the rain smells like and whether it's coming or not. Same thing in Spain. Same thing in the US. We saw in Moto2 a few years ago, Cam Beaubier put that Moto2 bike on pole position at COTA. And so home field advantage, home track advantage in MotoGP is a real thing. So when you throw in a curveball, these flyaway races that the racers don't get to go to all that much, I kind of take away Malaysia and Thailand a little bit because they do a lot of testing, especially in Malaysia. So the riders are very familiar with the Malaysia round. But when it comes to rounds like COTA, like Brazil this week, like Qatar, the playing field is a little more equal. So we get to see weird stuff happen, like Fabio Di Giannantonio fighting for the podiums with Marc Marquez. We get to see things like other riders, not just a Marc Marquez or a Pecco or even a Bez, just all qualifying right out the gate super fast. These tighten down the times super together and allows us to really watch racing. We saw Alex Rins kind of up there in the standings this weekend. We saw Diogo Moreira going pretty well for the rookie. We saw different things. We saw different names. So I always love to watch the flyaway races. To me, they're the most entertaining because they are the most unpredictable. You know Alex, Marc Marquez, they're going to go great at Aragon. They're going to go great at Jerez. Most of the riders who grew up in Europe are going to go great there. We don't know what to expect from Brazil. I was not expecting, based on Friday, Bez's performance on Friday, I was not expecting Bez to just go to the front of this Grand Prix and never look back. I mean, we saw him in qualifying get through Q2, get through Q1 into Q2. We saw him put that sucker on the front row. We were there with Bez and Martin, had great qualifying rounds. I still didn't think Bez was just going to dominate the start of the race all the way through the finish. So it does beg the question, is Bez the new alien? Well, let's look at the resume because he won 3 races last year. He won the last 2 races of last year. And he's won the first 2 races of this year. He was leading the sprint in round 1 before he kind of threw it away. He made a mistake. Even the aliens make mistakes. He's leading the championship now, and I think they said on the broadcast he's led 101 laps this season, if that's even possible. I don't know if that's possible, but he's been in the top of a lot of frickin' sessions. He's definitely a rider at the top of his game. He's riding as good as he has ever ridden in his career, and he's riding on a machine that feels like it's ultra competitive right now. Now, we don't know where the Aprilia goes from here. We know these last 2 rounds have been very hot. They've used this harder carcass tire that the Aprilia seems to really like. Will it change when they go to Austin and beyond into Europe? We don't know. But where we're sitting right now, Bez is in control. He looks like he can put that bike where he wants it. With the exception of that Friday, they were a little lost. Again, mixed conditions. It was a hard day. Saturday was even wackier. But he pulls it together, saves the weekend, does okay in the sprint, makes sure to win the main Grand Prix. So does that put him at alien status? Does 4 wins in a row put you at alien status? I think they said in the broadcast it was Rossi, Marquez, Lorenzo, and Pecco are some of the only riders who've won 4 in a row in the modern MotoGP area, and now Bez gets to put his name on that list. So does that make him an alien? I think this is a debate. I think this is the first time this is a debate. People have been asking me for the last year, do you think there are any aliens other than Marc Marquez? And what my stock answer has been, I think there's Marc Marquez, and then I think there's kind of baby aliens. I think Pedro Acosta is a baby alien. I think Fabio Quartararo is a baby alien. I think Marco Bezzecchi is a baby alien. And that's the group I kind of put together in that as of right now. I think Jorge Martin is a baby alien. But does Bez need an upgrade? Not yet. I love Bez. Bez is one of my favorite riders in the paddock. I love what he's doing on the Aprilia. I love that he went there as kind of the number 2 rider behind Jorge Martin, and when Jorge got hurt, Bez took this opportunity with both hands and is now the number 1 rider there. And he's not going to give it up easy to Jorge Martin. He's not just going to move aside and say, okay, Jorge, your team. Because who's going to be at Aprilia long term? It's Marco Bezzecchi. For all we know right now, I mean, the word on the street, Jorge Martin is already out the door. He's heading to Yamaha next year. This is Bez's team. He is the number 1 rider of this team. So things have changed. Why am I not giving him alien status? I want to see one more win. I'm greedy. I really want to prove him. I really want him to prove himself. I really want him to cement it and make it almost undeniable to even the most fervent Bez VR46 Academy Camp haters out there. I want Marc Marquez fans to look at Bez and go, yeah, fair play, dude. So I'll make this deal for Marco Bezzecchi. Marco, if you're listening, I know you're not, but if you're listening, Marco Bezzecchi, you win 5 races in a row. You win next weekend at COTA, and you automatically go alien status. automatically. I'm not even going to debate it. We're going to put one line on the podcast, and the question is going to be, is Bez the new alien? The answer is yes. Next subject, move on. Does he already deserve it? Maybe. I think it's debatable. I don't want it to be a debate. I want him to put the nail in the coffin right away. 5 wins in a row. That's what he gets to be an alien. That's what he has to do to be an alien status, in my eyes. So now we're going to go to a little segment where we're going to analyze the team. So we're going to talk about the biggest gap between one team member and the other. And I think you may know who I'm going to talk about already. There was a couple articles that came out this week, and I even saw some questions on Reddit talking about, with Digia running at the front, challenging Marc Marquez on the same machinery. We saw Digia go toe-to-toe with Marc Marquez in the sprint. We saw him go toe-to-toe with Marc Marquez in the main Grand Prix. The top 2 Ducatis, Digia on the same machinery as Marc Marquez, took it to Marc in the Grand Prix, comes out with the win, beats Marc Marquez on the same bike, which we say does not happen very often. You look at Marc Marquez's teammates, they don't beat him on equal machinery very often, if at all. And we have Fabio Di Giannantonio up there this week. He qualified well in the first week, had his sprint kind of ruined by Alex Marquez, and then just kind of underperformed in the main Grand Prix. But this week, we've seen a very, very different guy. Fast all weekend long, challenging, confident, really, really good on the bike. His teammate, Frankie Morbidelli, is nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. We talk about difference between teammates. You have Bez and Martin going 1-2. You have the Hondas where the Hondas are. You have the Yamahas where the Yamahas are. Now, you could argue the KTMs where you have Pedro Acosta and everyone else. That's a pretty big gap too. But because Pedro finished 7th instead of on the podium, we're going to go with Bez and Morbidelli being the biggest gap between teammates this week. Because I don't know what Frankie's doing on the MotoGP bike. Everyone's talking about the Ducati days, like where are they? How fast are they? Well, you look at Morbidelli and how many Ducatis are in front of him. Forget how many Aprilias are in front of him. He's not even in that category. Look at your own bike. Your teammate is kicking your butt. Marc Marquez is kicking your butt. Alex is in front of you. Fermin Aldeguer, did he finish in front of Frankie today? I mean, I don't know what's happened to this guy over the last few years. He seems ultra confident. He seems relaxed when he's talking on camera. He seems like he still knows how to ride. But when it comes to the results, and especially the race day, I feel like this guy used to be really a racer, and it just isn't happening right now. And it's super disappointing. So, there you go. Take it with what you will. I think that's the biggest gap between teammates. Hats off to Digia. I think, once again, he's looking at the possibility that he might not be in MotoGP for very much longer. He might be on his way out the door. There's talks that Fermin Aldeguer is coming into that team as VR46 being the #1 Ducati satellite team. They should have the big rising star instead of Gresini. They're going to fight to get him. So should he be there with his factory contract? Maybe he should. Who's going to be next to him? They bring in some young blood from Moto2. Maybe someone from Moto2 does impress them. But if Digia keeps getting podiums, if he's running at the front, if he's beating Marc Marquez, it's also hard to say goodbye to the guy. And that's what he's going to do. His job this year is to make that decision from Ducati as difficult as humanly possible, and not a bad way to do it this weekend. So let's go to my predictions. We're doing the predictions a little bit different. I think we talked about it last week on Monday Morning MotoGP. In week 1, we tried to guess who was going to become first across the line and who was going to be dead last. I got the first right. I predicted Marco Bezzecchi would win the race. Last week, he absolutely did. I did think that Enea Bastianini was going to be last. That didn't happen. So this week, we're doing who's going to get second. Who was going to get second and who was going to get second to last? Well, 2 weeks in a row, on one side, I guessed it absolutely bang on, dead right. Jorge Martin gets second in my MotoGP prediction. I said it on Saturday. Jorge Martin would be on the podium. He was going to get second this week. He absolutely did. I am 2 for 2. On the other side of the coin, I didn't do so well. I didn't think Alex Rins was going to have a good weekend. I was feeling some bad luck come his way. Unfortunately, I think that was more Jack Miller getting his bad luck and not Alex Rins. Alex Rins did not finish second to last. I believe Alex actually finished in the points. Maybe second to last points, if only that were the game. So this is a lot harder than it kind of looks. So for Coda, if you're following along, for Coda, we're going to try to predict who will get third and who will get third to last. I seem to have maybe a little bit of a bead on the front half of this idea. The back half, no frickin' clue. So that brings me to the underperformers of the week. First up, underperformers, all of the KTMs, all of them. Pedro Acosta outside of the top 7. We said that. Brad Binder crashing out. Enea Bastianini and Maverick Vinales are MIA in MotoGP. They are gone. We haven't heard from them. Jorge Lorenzo is probably sending out a search party at this point to figure out where Maverick Vinales and his form have gone off to. Whatever's going on at KTM right now at the Tech 3 garage, looking a little bit like Haas of old. Anyway, also Mir. Joan Mir, you got to stop DNFing, man. Running at a decent pace. I think he was running 7th when he went down. We're going to start calling him Mr. DNF if we're not already. Too many DNFs. He crashes too much. I think they said in the broadcast of 58 race starts, it's 34 DNFs or something like that. Way, way too many. And then one other underperformer, which may surprise you. I'm a big fan of this guy, but Ayagura, I think where he qualified to where he finished the races, I was expecting more out of him. I wanted to see him go forward at the start. We saw people kind of come around him at the start, him get mired mid-pack in both the sprint and the main Grand Prix, ultimately having pace of the leaders, just not able to use it. I think in the Grand Prix, if he would have gotten a better start and was running with Digi and Marc Marquez, it could have been an Aprilia lockout of that podium. Very, very easily. He had a lot of speed. He went through on everyone in front of him fairly easy with not much of a fight. And these are not slouch riders. He's going through on Alex Marquez on the last lap. The dude knows how to ride, and he's on a Ducati. There's no excuses of, well, he passed. No, he's passing good riders. He had extremely good pace again late in the race. He's just putting himself too much at a disadvantage with bad starts. So even though, again, he finishes 5th, I think, in the sprint and 5th in the Grand Prix. Really good weekend for him overall. Great start to the season for him between Thailand and this weekend in Brazil. But I was really hoping for a podium for him. It was a really good opportunity, and he kind of let it slip through his fingers. So overperformers are a little bit easier. I mean, Digia overperformed, I think, where we thought he would be going into this weekend. I think Bez, it's weird to say that the front runner or someone we think is going to fight for the championship overperformed, but I did not see him just pulling out a gap and then leaving everyone behind. And hats off to Jorge Martin. You got to say that he's back. He's starting to qualify well. He's figuring out the one-lap speed on the Aprilia. And I said, when he figures out the qualifying on the Aprilia, everyone else is a little bit screwed, because the dude is going to find the sprint speed. He's going to find the Grand Prix speed. He's going to start reeling off podiums. And when he gets confident, he's going to get even faster. And another overachiever, at least for the qualifying and the sprint finish, was Fabio Quartararo. That Yamaha has no business. The Yamaha has no business being P4 on the grid. Somehow it was there. And it just shows you how hard he is really trying to push. The characteristics of that track, fairly friendly to Yamaha. It's not a stop-start corner leading onto the main straight. It's a pretty fast corner, so they're not getting swallowed up in the straightaway as much as they normally do when they're down on power. And then the rest of the track is pretty tight and twisty, and we know how good he can turn that bike, even the new V4 platform. So congratulations to him. I know he's not feeling satisfied with any of those results, but it's got to feel at least a little bit to not be, starting the race P12 or behind. Well, that's it. That's everything from Brazil. Join us next week. We're going to talk about COTA. We're going to be back in Austin for another round of MotoGP. Can't wait for that, and we'll see. The predictions will come out on Saturday of who's going to get third, who's going to get third to last, and all the other fun will happen throughout the weekend. Looking forward to a good race at COTA, and we'll see you next time.